Super. So now it's my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dhammamegha. Dhammamegha's got the best shirt so far. I know Dhammamegha well from her work at Windhorse Publications, where she's the director. And I believe she's broadcasting from London. And she'll be talking on the theme of the Buddha's begging bowl. So thanks very much for joining us, Dhammamegha, and it's over to you.
Thanks, Dhivan. I've just looked at the gallery view. Amazing to see so many people here, so many friends and people I haven't met before. This is actually my first Buddhafield. Can you believe it? I've always wanted to go to Buddhafield, and I certainly imagined my feet being wetter.
Yeah, of course.
And the task I've been given is to really introduce the overall theme, particularly of this Dhammapala, this reflection part of the program. And I'm going to do that by talking about the theme itself. So holding to nothing, whatever. Where does that come from? What does it mean? And many of you will know that this theme, holding to nothing, whatever, comes from the Heart Sutra, that wisdom text that's at the very essence of the wisdom tradition of Buddhism, paradoxical and beautiful and heart-opening that it is. So I want to talk about, or provide two images, if you like, to think about this holding to nothing, whatever. And I'll start at the beginning of the Heart Sutra, which says, the Bodhisattva of compassion, when he or she or they meditated deeply, saw the emptiness of all five skandhas and sundered the bonds that caused him or her suffering. So I suppose that's the first thing to notice about this, this theme, this invitation of holding to nothing, whatever, that awakening, wisdom is a matter of compassion. Wisdom is a matter to be practiced and attained through practice of sensitivity and compassion. So how? How do we hold to nothing, whatever? What does that mean? So in the text itself, it says, in meditation, which of course is not the only way, but in meditation, the awakening being sees the true nature of life. And this nature of life is captured in the phrase, seeing the emptiness of all five skandhas. And the skandhas, or the aggregates, are really those things, those processes or aspects that combined to form the human condition for each and every one of us. So that's the physical form of the body, contact, sensation, feelings or emotional tone, perception, how we recognize, label things, will, our volition, what we want, what we don't want, and consciousness, this very capacity for awareness itself. So another way of saying this is that things, phenomena, these processes continue on their own, that phenomena roll on all the time. But when we attempt, or when we try to grasp them mid-flow, when we hold on to them, when we take them personally or identify with them and try to make them fixed or hold on to them in some sort of fixity, that's when we cause suffering. That's when we experience suffering for ourselves and others. So if we're to accord fully with life, if we're to participate in life, then our task is to let go of our wish, if you like, to find refuge or ground in something which is just not of the nature to provide that ground. So that's the theory. but I don't know, that can sound a little abstract. What does that mean? And what does it look like or feel like? So I've found this very beautiful song of liberation that was spoken by a Japanese nun, an abbess called Teijitsu, which I'll read to you, which is, if you can even think of these terms, a first person account of letting go. She saw that all phenomena arose, abided, and fell away. She saw that even knowing this arose, abided, and fell away. And then she knew there was nothing more than this. No ground, nothing to lean on stronger than the cane that she held. Nothing to lean upon at all, and no one leaning. And she opened the clenched fist in her mind and let go, and fell into the midst of everything. So maybe I'll read that again. There's lovely images in there. She saw that all phenomena arose, abided, and fell away. She saw that even knowing this arose, abided, and fell away. And then she knew that there was nothing more than this, no ground, nothing to lean on stronger than her cane, nothing to lean upon at all, and no one leaning. And she opened the clenched fist of her mind and let go and fell into the midst of everything. I find that rather beautiful, very evocative. So that's part of what we mean by emptiness, or seeing through the skandhas, the emptiness of the skandhas, that there's nothing to hold on to. Phenomena of not of the nature. They don't come with handles that we can hold on to or manipulate or fix in a way that we want to. So what we do is we practice to notice where we are grasping and where we're looking for ground. And we practice to let go of the maps of the world and experience that limit our connection with reality, and therefore limit our compassion. Of course, here we are at an online Buddhafield. Who would have thought? We're in a virtual field. The maps that we have of the world simply don't usually correspond to reality. What we anticipate, what we remember, how we map the world around us is wrong, because our capacity to map is always going to have error. It may be helpful in some respects, but there's always going to be error. It's never sufficient to the nature of reality itself. Reality and these processes are far more complex, more beautiful, more impersonal than we can imagine. So Dhivan mentioned I started a new job at Windhorse Publications 6 months ago, and it's not been anything like what I anticipated. And perhaps it's not even what I would have chosen. I wouldn't have chosen to do what has been anticipated in terms of the way things have gone. And it's created some difficulties, and it's created some amazing opportunities. Things that I would never have done or thought to do have been possible because suddenly we're in these unexpected arrangements. But it would be mad to take COVID personally, wouldn't it? But that's what we do when we grasp. We take things personally. It's like taking the weather personally, wanting or not wanting, liking or not liking, understanding or not understanding. Life eludes our grasp. We've had Buddhafield online. We've had lockdown. We've had, can you even remember, a year of fires in Australia that started off this year, and the extraordinary response and solidarity that's come out of the horror of George Floyd's killing. Like, none of that we could have anticipated. Could we have imagined this year? Could we have mapped this year? No. But can we be present to respond to its possibilities? Yes. If we let go of more and more of our presumptions and assumptions, we can be freed up to act out of compassion. And usually there's a release of some kind of tension or strife that comes when we're more in accord with how things actually are, rather than how we imagine them to be. So I feel like that's the holding to nothing, whatever, but no one holding. This one perhaps takes a bit more engagement, and it's an incredible program that we've got lined up in Buddhafield in this and the other threads or streams of it. And I'd really recommend you spend the next couple of days exploring this question experientially in meditation and in ritual and in listening to some of the other talks, to explore as a reflection and also direct experience. What does it mean that there is no one holding? Because basically there's a lot of subjective experience going on, isn't there? We can't deny that. But the I that we usually take to be holding is not also what we think it is. I am not what I think I am. You are not what you think you are. This is not what we think it is either. And usually this sense of an I is actually a phenomena created by contraction. It's the fist in the mind that seeks to protect or defend a sense of self, whereas actually it's usually an identification with a much smaller range of experience than is actually possible for us, a much smaller range of courage and beauty and connection than is actually possible for us. So this is what we're talking about when we talk about holding to nothing, whatever. It's an image of liberation, of freedom, of letting go. And it's an imagination of the gold, a picture of the Bodhisattva of compassion, dwelling in wisdom, which is great. And but how do we let go? How do we relate from what the nature of our actual experience is in this moment to that beautiful image of a complete letting go, especially when we're not meditating deeply in the course of wisdom and we're under the sway of the everyday mind. So I really want to give a second image, not an image of the goal, but an image of the path, if you like, as something to take with us into the next couple of days. And that's the image of the begging bowl. And some of you may have done prostration practice before, which is really when we take all of ourselves and throw ourselves down at the foot of the Buddha, if you like. And in Triratna in particular, the refuge tree to which we prostrate, right at the middle of it is the historical Buddha Shakyamuni. And in his lap, he holds a begging bowl. And there's the begging bowl, and it is empty, and it flowers. Right from the center of this bowl comes this lotus of compassion, which is also a symbol of complete liberation for us human beings. And I think this image of a bowl is paradoxical, but it sort of, there's a question that somehow is important to me, which is a question of what do we need to hold on to in order to let go? What helps us let go? Or another way we can put it is, what can we take refuge in that allows us to be calm and loving and spacious and real enough to let go of the tight knots of our mind? And I love this image of the begging bowl. Like literally in the time of the Buddha would have gone to get his food in this way. He would have gone with his hunger and an empty bowl to the people around him, and he would have been utterly receptive. There's no matter of choice of what gets put in that bowl. So you go hungry and you receive whatever it is that is given to you. And it's a bit like life's like that. Life is king. Like we belong to life. We can't choose what will be put in our bowl. But this bowl symbolically is also a bit like we carry our longing with us. We carry our openness and our receptivity with us, our wish to be connected and true, our wish to have a meaningful life, our wish to do something positive in the world. And that bowl has to be empty for us to be able to receive teachings. It has to be empty enough for us to be able to be in connection with others. But the incredible thing is that what you get given if you practice the Dharma, if we follow these teachings, is emptiness. Lots of it. It's a bit like what we get given, you cannot possibly hold on to, you can't appropriate. And if all goes well, you won't be given false certainties, you won't be given platitudes, you won't be given something that you can believe on by rote. What you get given is witness and the responsibility to take responsibility for your mind and your mental states. You'll get greater sensitivity, you'll get means and methods to develop in meditation, but you can't possess any of those things. So you get given a more and more full openness, a capacity for receptivity, and it's exactly out of that mix of longing and openness that we and others can flourish. So I wanted to offer that image, if you like, of us engaging with each other, engaging with the practices in the next days, knowing that we're holding our bowls empty and that others around us also have their longing in front of them, have their wish to connect and their wish for wisdom. And I think it leaves us with a series of questions for all of us, or reflections for all of us to take into the next days. So the one is sort of, what is your begging bowl made of? What is your heart wish? What are your hopes at the moment? Can you bring those into relation with others? And then what have you already had to let go of, even in the last few months? And what have you learned from that experience of letting go and coming more into accord with how things really are? And we've all had lots of practice of that, no doubt, in the last few months. And then maybe to also, with some sensitivity and care, become aware of where we know that our minds or our hearts are knotted, where we're grasping or holding on to something, whether that's a view or an emotional state or a sense of yourself. And just see if you can practice and play with each other in the next days to soften, to create some space around those knots, to soften, to open up and to connect with others. So I wish you a wonderful, wonderful Buddhafield. Thanks, Dhivan.
Thank you so much, Dhammamegha. Those of you who know how, perhaps we can give Dhammamegha an electronic clap, or maybe just a hand wave. Yes. Thanks again. Shall we just take half a minute just to feel into those questions before we go on to our next speaker? So, what is my begging bowl made of? What have I had to let go of this year? And where are we closed? And no doubt we'll be taking those questions into our next few days and the rest of the year. Thanks again, Dhammamegha. So now we go on to our next speaker, Viryanaya. Would you like to unmute yourself? Great. And I put the spotlight on Viryanaya now. There she is. I've forgotten what Viryanaya is going to talk about. So you have to.
I'll say, don't worry.
That's brilliant. Yeah, but it's Viryanaya is a long-term Buddhafield friend and supporter, so it's wonderful to welcome her to this first set of talks. So we're very much looking forward to what you might say about our theme. So over to you.
Thank you, Dhivan. Okay, so my title of my talk is Loving What is Mortal. Okay, loving what is mortal. Loving what must die. So this is a quote from a poem which some of you know, I'm sure, by Mary Oliver, In Blackwater Woods. So here is the section I'm going to concentrate on. And Mary Oliver says, to live in this world, you must be able to do three things. To love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it. And when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. So that's our task. We're holding to nothing whatever. But we have to let go of things. We have to love them and let go of them. And we know in one level that things are impermanent and changeable and imperfect. But we resist this because it's painful. And it sounds miserable and scary and life-denying and no fun at all. So how do we do this? How do we love what is mortal, but yet let go of it? So what I want to bring in here is the concept and the practice of Wabi-Sabi, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. It's a Japanese aesthetic. And what it celebrates is that we are letting go of our illusion of permanence, but it doesn't mean losing our sense of wonder and aesthetic appreciation. So the practice of Wabi-Sabi helps us to enjoy and feel our connection, love our connection with an impermanent and imperfect world. So I am going to talk about this, and I'm also going to attempt, at any rate, to show you some images, just a few. So you may have to be patient with me while I wrestle with the tech there. Okay. So Wabi-Sabi delights in transient beauty, beauty that must die. And beauty, of course, we're very familiar with delighting in beauty, but very often we approach it in the wrong way. We approach it in terms of grasping and holding and owning and clinging. But Wabi-Sabi says, let us engage with beauty in harmony with the way things really are. Okay. So the term wabi in Japanese means harmony and peace. And sabi literally means the bloom of time. Isn't that wonderful? The bloom of time. So it's a word that describes the life cycle something goes through, from being new to being corroded by time and use. So it reminds us of the fleetingness of beauty. Okay, so I'm now going to show you a picture, just to give a sense of that. Okay, can we see that? Yeah. So if we look at that image, that rusting piece of metal, it's so beautiful. It's a whole world. It's so easy just to see that as, oh, that needs repainting, or oh, that's rubbish. But if we look at it, the colours, the shapes, it's just exquisite. It's just beautiful. Just beautiful. Okay. So Wabi-Sabi recognizes the beauty of things that are loved and cared for, rather than things that are new and shiny. So I'll give an example of this. Some of you know my daughter, Rosie. Now, Rosie, as you can imagine, spent an awful lot of her childhood climbing trees and going in and out of the rivers and rolling around in the mud. And quite right too, as far as I was concerned. And her grandmother had given her a very beautiful skirt with embroidery on. And of course, she wanted to wear this beautiful skirt while she was climbing trees and rolling around in the mud and going in the river. And of course, the skirt got torn. And so I mended it. And then it got torn again. And I mended it again. And over time, the skirt became more mend than it was original material. But we talked about it, she and I, and we both agreed that the skirt was more beautiful and more meaningful because it had been mended, because it was cared for, and it was touched with love. And if she'd had a new skirt, it wouldn't have had all that wealth of meaning and of care. And we can see, I'm sure, the links between Wabi-Sabi and our Western approach of overconsumption, wanting new things, and the damage that that does. And this also links, and again I'm going to share another picture, with how we see ourselves. So, Dhivan, if you could give me a thumbs up when you can see this picture. Okay, great. So isn't that wonderful? Isn't she beautiful? There's an old woman from the mountains, no teeth, but you can see her life. You can see her beauty. And not because she's shining in you, but because you can see her character in her face. And that's a hard thing to do, to let go of our sense of ourselves as young and shiny, and to move into that sense of ourselves as old and wrinkly. Yeah, it's not a comfortable thing to do. But appreciating that beauty, that real beauty, that can be present in what's old, because we can see the life that's lived. Okay. So if I just get rid of that. So Leonard Cohen, one of the priests of Wabi-Sabi, has a famous line you probably heard of. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. And so when things are cracked, there is the possibility of new life arising, new thoughts, new ideas, new understanding. And it doesn't come from holding on. It doesn't come from being tight-fisted, as Dhammamegha said. It comes from something that's cracked, something that's opened. New life, new awareness can arise. So, I've got one other picture here I'm going to show you, which I think is very beautiful. And again, that illustrates what I mean. Okay. So what do we see here? Do we see a weed? Do we see something that has to be grubbed out of the paving stones? The dandelion head is blowing away, is fading, is falling. But each seed has that possibility of new life, new awareness. Okay. I'm going to give you another long image. So one of the things we're used to in the West is the idea of the explorer Okay, so thinking about the idea of the explorer, the conqueror. This is a very common view that we have. Understanding. So if you think of the explorer, conquering, understanding, mapping and fixing and owning. But that image of the conqueror, though obviously there's something positive there, it's very ego reinforcing. It's seeking perfection, it's seeking ownership, and it's rather tightening round the ego. It's tightening round ourselves. But the Wabi-Sabi approach is much more like the pilgrim on the sacred mountain, or the pilgrim near the sacred mountain. I've got one last image to show you. And again, some of you may be familiar with this image. So let's have a look. Okay, can we see that? Can you see the picture? Yep. So that is pilgrims going round Mount Kailash in the Himalayas. So you can see the prayer flags and you can see them walking around that sacred space. Okay. Now the image and the practice of the pilgrim is very different to that of the conqueror. So the pilgrim to the sacred mountain sits with awe and lets the sacred infuse them with humility, with openness. They recognize impermanence. They recognize their own limitations. But that's not done in a spirit of being miserable. It's not done in the spirit of being crushed. It's done in the spirit of letting the ego soften and opening into the world, opening up to others, seeing the beauty in how things are, not trying to conquer them or to own them, not trying to map them or to fix them, but to delight in them, to take delight in not knowing, in not understanding, in sitting with mystery, in sitting with change, in sitting with not knowing, not owning, with holding to nothing, whatever.
Thank you so much, Viryanaya. Shall we give Viryanaya a bit of feedback? Thank you so much for a talk that invited us in to that very state of Wabi-Sabi with those images, and a talk which, as it were, gave us another angle on what it might be to hold that begging bowl that Dhammamegha was inviting us to consider. So let's have a short break now and reconvene in 5 minutes at 2:45, 2:45, for Kamalanandi's talk. So you can leave your cameras on if you want, or switch them off, but let's come back in 5 minutes. Thanks very much. Welcome back, everyone. If you've just joined, we've had people just joining. Warm welcome to our first talks of our Buddhafield online festival. We've had two lovely talks to start us off. Dhammamegha on the Buddha's begging bowl, and then Viryanaya on loving what is mortal. Just showing how once there's a theme for the festival, in this case, holding to nothing whatever, it prompts these rich reflections on that theme, which gives us something to chew on, a meat to discuss together. So let me now present our third speaker, Kamalanandi, and he's going to talk about "This is not what I am."
Thank you. Oh, what a great honour to be speaking alongside the two marvellous speakers that we've already had. Just a word before I start for people who don't know me or anybody watching on the Facebook Live or watching the recording afterwards. I'm completely blind in my left eye, so I can't control how it moves. So at the moment, I think it's looking that way. So yeah, you might find if you're trying to work out what I'm doing with my eyes, that a bit confusing. So just, just take the whole lot in. Yeah, okay. So the title of my talk is "This is not who I am." And it's a brief personal reflection on the intersection between identity politics and the Anatta-lakkhana Sutta. So when I was asked to give the talk, I guess I was reflecting on the theme myself a lot, holding to nothing whatever, and my own experiences. And there's definitely been, clear events in my life when there hasn't been anything to hold on to, no certainty or security. So I was looking through them and wondering what to pick. I could go with the ending of my marriage, becoming a parent, having a nervous breakdown. That happened before becoming a parent, by the way. And but I decided to just pick two things that I would talk about that seemed to have some kind of a connection here. So I'm going with the situation where I watched my gender unravel in 2014, 2015, and also undergoing guidance in Buddhist insight techniques in 2018, 2019. So I was assigned female at birth and lived ostensibly as such until relatively recently. In 2014, after a couple of quite significant life changes, I began to shift a little bit what I was doing with my hair, clothes I was wearing. And that started an unraveling of a whole set of ideas I had had about living in my designated gender of being a girl and then a woman. It wasn't the first time it had happened. I had an earlier episode like this in my childhood where I chose to live like a boy for a while. So this time in 2014, it started off feeling quite liberating and quite freeing. And then that switched to feeling unnerving as it began to dawn on me that there was further to go. With each step, I began to see that there were more steps needed. So that's an incredibly simplified and shortened version of my experience of coming out as transgender at the age of 38. But suffice to say, it was distinctly uncomfortable and extraordinary to find myself in this position. And also maybe not that much of a surprise. I remember as a child having a view of adult life that you get there. You arrive at being an adult and that's you done. You've got the job, the relationship, the house, and you're sorted. And it's not really worked out like that. Nothing has been guaranteed. And you don't really know what's going to happen next. There's nothing to hold on to. So I've been a Buddhist for 21 years, but it was only a few years ago that I felt like I'd kind of jumped down from the map and onto the actual terrain of the bit of Buddhist practice that's about seeing the illusion of having a self. I've been fortunate enough to have had some good teachers and guides and support of peers. And the work is really far from done, but a degree of liberation has occurred which is nice. I was on retreat last year, and the main teacher used this phrase a lot in his talks. This is not mine. This is not me. This is not myself. I wrote it on the front of my notebook, and it took a while before I got round to trying to find out what it was and where it was from. But a little bit of Googling, and it turned it up pretty quickly. So it's from the Anatta-lakkhana Sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya. And it's a brief sutta that basically says that we can't really believe that we have a self, because if we did, then we surely wouldn't allow ourselves to suffer. That if we were in control, then we would be able to control that. And it says, because all of our constituent parts, form, feeling, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, which are also known as the skandhas, because they are all impermanent, and that according to this sutta, impermanent things are painful, that therefore they're not fit to be regarded as mine, me, or myself. You could be forgiven for thinking that coming out as trans in a Buddhist Sangha would be straightforward. It wasn't. It was incredibly hard, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But it was also a really good reality check, a good opportunity to take off the rose-tinted glasses. I've got a friend who's also in the Triratna Buddhist order, and she has a trans history herself. And we compared notes on what we call the surely phrases. And these are a stock list of statements that people in our Sangha would make us on finding out about the shift in our gender identity. So here's a couple. But surely, because that's kind of, that's why we call them the surely statements, because they kind of always started like that. But surely, as a Buddhist, we should be going beyond identity. So aren't you going backwards because you're telling us you now identify as this gender instead? But surely you're investing in a sense of self now, and that's unskillful. Really good questions. And maybe by the end of this brief talk, I will have answered them or attempted to. So I mentioned that it's been hard coming out as trans in the Triratna Buddhist order. And that's partly because it's just not easy being trans. And I'm saying that as someone who lives in a country, that's the UK, with a fairly good public healthcare system and good legal protections in place for minorities like me. But just to show up in a space as a trans person is a form of activism. Our visibility has an effect. Moreover, there are still many things that are needed to be done, still many things that are needed to be able to raise our quality of life up to that of the average cisgender person in the UK. So the word I just used now, cis, if you're not familiar with it, that's just the opposite of trans. So if you are cis, that just means you identify with the gender that you were assigned at birth. So yeah, we still need a lot of things to happen to raise our quality of life up to that of the average cisgender person in the UK. And we're currently in a time where we actually risk losing what rights we have under the current government. So it's fairly impossible to be trans and not be involved in some sort of activist work, whether that's pushing petitions around or writing to your MPs or taking part in marches or doing education work. If you've not come across this thing before, there's this thing called identity politics, this idea called identity politics. And it's when people have political positions based on things like their ethnicity, race, religion, rather than political positions based on a broader set of policies. And movements like Black Lives Matter would get labelled as identity politics, I should imagine. It's not a category that I would use to define my personal political perspective, but it's definitely been levelled at me that I'm caught up in identity politics. So I'm kind of in this hilarious position of being someone who's apparently practicing identity politics, whilst also being someone who is committed to undoing any sense of having a self on which to base an identity. So how is that possible? I think the answer lies in the conceptual construction of the relative and absolute. So on a relative level, I'm living in this world, operating within societal norms, legal structures, and economic realities. And I can be as awakened as I like, but I still need to find ways to eat and keep myself well. As a trans person, I need to navigate the healthcare system in order to get the medical support that I need to be well and happy. It's been a surprise to some of my cis Buddhist counterparts that this has been necessary. Another of the surely questions that I spoke of earlier, surely you don't need to make any changes to your body because you can work through all that with your meditation practice, which to me is like a Buddhist version of pray the gay away. And it can feel like a judgment that I'm just not Buddhisting hard enough. My answer to questions like this has been to go back to all the reasons why we might need medical support, any of us. There's loads of remedies and medicines and treatments that a lot of us need to be well. So I'm on high strength pain medication. I'll probably be on it for life because of an accident I had when I was younger. Without it, I wouldn't be able to work. I certainly wouldn't be able to sit here and give this talk. It works pretty well most of the time, and I'm really, really grateful for it. As well as that, I take CBD oil, and that really helps with my ability to stay focused because I have ADHD. Some people break bones. They need to go to hospital to get them mended. So there are all sorts of reasons to seek medical support to be well and happy. And being trans is one of those things. Well, to clarify, being trans like me is one of those things, because there are actually lots of folks with diverse gender identities who don't feel any need for medical interventions. And it doesn't make them any less trans or non-binary or whatever description they use to communicate their sense of gender or lack of it. The NHS has been treating trans people for decades because it's very clear that the treatment has the desired outcome of supporting people to become well and happy that were otherwise distressed by the incongruency of their sense of gender with the physical form that they were born with. And it's really great that there are ways to alleviate that particular kind of suffering, just like it's great that we have all these other ways of alleviating suffering. You just need to find the one that works. So it's on this relative level that I also feel the need to be involved in activist work, as being trans is still a hard thing to be, and too many of us are still being killed for it. And I'd like that not to happen. I want to work to alleviate that kind of suffering. And alongside this particular way of being in this world, I also know that this is not me. This is not mine, and this is not who I am. What I mean by this is that whilst I need to use certain labels to communicate my experience, so trans, Buddhist, dad, for example, those are just pointers to what my experience is so that I can communicate that to you. That's all they are. They just describe a bunch of stuff so that we can connect with each other. Those labels don't definitely pin me down to existing in a certain way. Nagarjuna says that we use words to go beyond words. So, in summary, I don't find any conflict in stating that I both know who I am on the relative level, and that if I happen to be doing, and if what I happen to be doing by trying to advocate for people like me to be treated with more kindness is called identity politics, then that's neither here nor there. And also, I know that this is not me. This is not mine, and this is not who I am. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kamalanandi. A big wave to you. Okay, I've cancelled the spotlight on Kamalanandi, though you're still there. Well, we've had 3 contrasting talks, each bringing quite a depth of insight and question to the theme of holding to nothing whatever. Especially Kamalanandi's talk then invited us to perhaps think about how holding to nothing whatever is concerned with our relationship with the ultimate truth. And it doesn't necessarily interfere with our engagement in the world, carrying out acts of compassion in which you take appearance to be that which needs to be addressed. So thanks to all 3 of our speakers. We've got the opportunity now to ask questions of our 3 speakers, to raise points for discussion perhaps. They've all agreed that they're all open to questions. So you could either write your question in the chat box or put your hand up, and I'll kind of chair any discussion that we might want to have. So over to you to ask anything or bring up any topic for discussion. We've got a very good question just come up in the chat box, addressed to all our speakers, which is very suitable. Abbess asks, what have any of the speakers had to let go of in recent months? Following up this theme of holding to nothing whatever. Perhaps we should hear back from Dhammamegha, first of all.
Ah, yes. Well, I think, well, I had a plan, man. I had a plan in mind for this year. I really did. I thought to myself, oh, it would be really, really nice to do a 4-day-a-week job without too much responsibility, to give lots and lots of time for other pursuits, including pleasure and hanging out and a little bit of art. And so it's a bit like, if we think about it in terms of the skandhas, I had quite a strong volition, if you like, towards a particular thing, and basically that wish would have relied on a set of stability of conditions which simply haven't been there. So I think the thing was about letting go, not just on an overall picture, but a sort of moment-to-moment account of what ought to be happening now, in order to be able to respond practically, kindly, to be able to also not get massively stressed, you know, to be able to flow, to have a bit of ease in the midst of whatever happens. So practically, we put the rest of the team on furlough, and for 9 weeks, I've pretty much, as the least experienced member of Windhorse Publication, doing all of the operational work for 9 weeks, which meant that over and over again, I was at a limit of what I knew how to do. And actually, I was really surprisingly enjoying it quite a lot of the time. and feeling quite creative, but it sort of had nothing to do with what I thought was going to be happening or should be happening or to be happening. And I think there's something about, like, there's a sort of big sense of letting go of a plan or something like that, but it's much more like, right now I feel a bit of pressure. Can I relax? Can I let the energy go? Can I go for a walk? Can I say, actually, this is what's needed here and now? So a sort of I don't know, fragmenting of this sort of map of the mind or a set of assumptions, and just allowing it to be more movable, to be able to be more fluid and responsive, because there's a circumstance that I want to be able to support that stays, and the circumstance is different, so then it looks different. So I think that's one of the, I've got others, but that's one of the things that was really quite a big letting go. My great plan for life, the universe and everything.
Thanks, Dhammamegha. That's really vivid. Viryanaya, what have you had to let go of in recent months?
Well, like everybody, what I expected to be doing. I expected to be at Buddhafield and at the village and in the field and all that. But I guess what I've had to let go of most of, and this has been very difficult, I've had to let go of seeing my mother, who's in a nursing home a little way away. And I have not seen her since March, because they're not letting visitors in. And because I haven't been able to see her, she's not able to talk on the telephone, she's not able to talk on Skype or to respond to emails. So I've had no direct contact with her. And that has been a hard practice of not being able to communicate with her and having to let her go. And she's sort of moving further and further away from me. She's sort of disappearing. And I'm going to see her next week. We've made an appointment. We can have a socially distanced meeting 2 meters apart. And she may recognize me and she may not. So I'm letting go of her, and also letting go of my view of myself as having a place in her life, because I don't know if I still have that or not. Yeah. So that is an ongoing process.
Thanks so much, Viryanaya, and we're all hoping that next week your mum recognises you. Kamalanandi, any what might you have had to let go of in recent months?
Yeah, crikey. What a time, what a time. Quite early in lockdown, it was just basically just seeing everything fall down and fall apart. You know, my wall planner that had all the black lines through it for all the different Buddhafield events I'm involved in. First retreat for gender diverse people we were going to be doing. It was just going to be this amazing, beautiful thing. And then like, yeah, no, it's not happening. No. And more recently having to cancel the village retreat. Yeah, no, and that was breaking my heart. That's a very, very big part of mine and my family's life. Just watching those things fall and going, well, nothing was ever certain, was it? You know? So definitely that. And another thing I've had to let go of is my freedom, because I'm a single dad and I generally have my children with me during the week, but they're at school. They've not been at school. There's been no school for months. We're into the four months now of no school. So having my kids at home with me all the time has been extraordinary, actually. And the flip side of, I think sometimes, you know, there's the letting go and there's the things that we've missed, but there's the upside of what happens in this other new space that arises. So, you know, people were going mad with the reading and the sourdough bread and the DIY and stuff. For me, actually, I got to know my children so much better. And that has been an absolute gift. I didn't realize I didn't know them as well as that. And there's been all sorts of things I've got to know them so much better. So I think I will look back on this time and also be incredibly grateful for it, really. That's, you know, well, I say it might not happen again, but actually it could, couldn't it? So we just don't know. We don't know. Staying in the not knowing. Yeah.
Thanks, Kamalanandi. So yeah, we're exploring this theme of holding to nothing whatever, and of course the last few months have been an opportunity to explore that theme in ways we would never have chosen. But isn't that how it goes? Zoe has asked a question here, specifically to Viryanaya, which continues our reflections here. Is there anything that you've tried to appreciate using Wabi-Sabi and just found too difficult?
Okay, thanks for the question. I think I'll go back to what I said before there, that I have quite explicitly, like the dandelion head, you know, like the rusty wool, tried to appreciate that letting go of my mother is a natural process. You know, that is what arises. There's a story of, I think it was an abbot who was asked to say something positive, and he said, grandfather dies, father dies, son dies. And the questioner said, well, that doesn't sound very positive. And the abbot said, well, it's the right way round. You know, first the grandfather dies, then the son dies, then the grandson dies. And it's true, it's true. So, you know, my mother's a very old lady. She's had a full life. What's happening is a natural process. Right? In a way, it's not tragic. And she's already let go of a lot of life. A lot. So in a way, she's doing better than me because she's let go of a lot. But I'm sort of lagging behind because I haven't yet let go of her. And partly, I think it's because literally I haven't seen her. It'd be easier if I was able to see her. But because I haven't seen her, that's been harder. Yeah. So I would say there my intention has not been matched by my practice. Yeah, I'm working on it.
Thank you. So that's a kind of a rich response to the question, rather than saying there's something you found too difficult. It's rather the process has got its difficulties, and that's part of your reflection. Thank you. Any more questions that have occurred to you as to anyone as you've heard these talks, or that have come up in your own reflections on holding to nothing whatever? We've got some. Great, we just got some good comments coming in. And in fact, Singer Shree's asked us a question here. How do we bring this teaching to our experience of opinions and views, our own and others? How do we bring this teaching to our own experience of opinions and views, our own and others? So Singer Shree's asking us specifically about letting go perhaps of our own relationship to opinions and views, which is of course the bit that's perhaps most challenging for all of us. It's the closest to our own minds and hearts. Shall I invite Kamalanandi to reflect on that, if you have anything you'd like to say? Otherwise, that's fine.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think it's interesting. I feel like I've had some really good teaching. Like I've learned a lot myself in the last 6 months or so about how that whole thing of like, it's always other people, you know, it's other people who are the problem. It's other people who've got the bad ideas. It's other people's politics I don't like, and that's all bad. And I'm fine, and I'm good, and I'm sorted. But actually, if I'm wanting someone to move forwards from a view or something, then there must be things that I need to as well. That's always like flicking it back on myself and going, okay, well, if I'm critical of that, then what about me? To always just keep turning it back. So if I didn't like that thing they said, was there something I said too? What is that? What is that thing? What is that view or that belief? I was thinking particularly like with the whole Brexit business. I mean, God, Brexit feels like old hat now, doesn't it? But it is apparently still actually happening. With the Brexit stuff, I had it in my mind that people who'd voted for Brexit were just like stupid or like ill-advised or right. My view was they didn't care about other people. That was very clear in that view, that if you'd voted for Brexit, it meant you didn't care for other people. And then I saw somebody I know locally who's quite prominent in the Green Party, invited some of their friends who are involved in other political parties into a bit of very polite discourse around Brexit and so on. And there were a couple of people who were very clear that they were members of the Conservative Party who had voted for Brexit and why. And I read what they had put. And there was absolutely no doubt that they were coming from a position of care and compassion in their own minds, that they were convinced that what they did was right because of this, this, and this. And I could not find fault in that. And it was, I mean, I get goosebumps just talking about it because it was a real insight for me of like, what do I even know? You know, all these ideas I've got about other people and the shoulds and the shouldn'ts. And unless I'm actually prepared to listen and engage, and be open to learning myself and undoing my own views about other people, there's kind of no point. Like, we've got to all be in this together. You know, it's not just like other people who've got to sort themselves out. You know, like I've got to sort this out too and keep on checking back on myself all of the time. So it's an incredibly liberating teaching, the idea of, you know, nothing to hold on to and letting go of things, because it gives us the chance to always be like upgrading our version of ourselves, you know, all the time. So yeah, don't know if that is useful, but that would be my answer.
Well, I found that useful because the same thing has gone through my mind. So that's very rich, and it made me think about what having an empty begging bowl might feel like. And with that in mind, perhaps Dhammamegha might like to reflect on how do we bring this teaching to our own experience of opinions and views.
Yeah, Kamalanandi, that was a fantastic response. I think also, I think, as you say, it's really helpful to know that you have views. You know, so often we're so close to our views that we're not even aware that we have them. You know, there's such an automatic process of filtering and interpretation the whole time that we're not even aware of it. So I think engaging in conversations that are difficult or outside of one's comfort zone, or making sure we don't bubble ourselves into people who are just like us one way or another, is an incredibly useful tool to just sort of know where what our views are, and also obviously noticing our reactions. Reactions are a particularly good indicator of view. I think for me there's a sort of interim step between having a view and letting it go, and something else that I think about in relation to coaching. So, for example, if you look at the mind-turning verses, the first line of the mind-turning verses is, "I will always cherish all beings with a resolve to accomplish for them the greatest good." You know, I sort of feel like that'll probably do me for the rest of my life. Like, if there was one bit of Dharma that's a pretty good one. And I think there's something different between cherishing and agreeing. I'm always a bit fascinated by these sort of paradoxes in our tradition, that you need to have discriminating wisdom, in the sense that there are some things that are skillful and there are some things that are not skillful. There are things that conduce to the benefit and happiness of self and other, and there are things that don't conduce. But the injunction to cherish all beings, including those who are suffering from and causing suffering by ignorance, including when you're doing that yourself, seems to me to be a really powerful and demanding injunction. And in a way, I've had the dubious benefit of growing up as a white South African and having one very, very strong set of socializations around views and racism on the one hand, and then really having to spend a large part of the rest of my adult life looking at and undoing some of the lessons of that. Wasn't the only set of lessons I had. It was a wide range of values in my upbringing, but it is it's very stark to me that the people who are causing suffering often need also some way of being able to let go of their own views, and that often requires a kind of stepping out of comfort and a connection that allows for something else to be possible. So I think for me, I can't just go like, oh, I've got this view and it's a wrong view and therefore I have to let it go. There's almost like an interim step of being able to open my heart, or to remember that cherishing is what I value doing, which gives me the resources to do that even when it's quite difficult. Yeah, so that's the only thing I would add to what you said, Kamalanandi.
Thank you very much, Dhammamegha. The common theme, of course, has been that turning towards our own experience and views can be uncomfortable. That's, of course, why it's difficult to let go. So thanks for mentioning cherishing. Viryanaya, anything to, any insights to add to Singer Shree's invitation?
Well, I mean, obviously, I think Dhammamegha and Kamalanandi have said a lot of it. I suppose I would add briefly here, my philosophical training is very helpful, having a sense of being a truth seeker. And the virtue of being a truth seeker is you never stop. You think, well, you have that provisional approach where you say, well, I think this is right. Okay, I think this is right, and I'm going to work with this. But you're always aware, or you try always to be aware, that you may be wrong. There may be a further truth to stuff you don't understand. So for me, that's very important, that provisionality of what I hold. So I'm going to act on this in the knowledge. I may be wrong. In fact, I'm almost certainly wrong in some respects. I may gain a greater knowledge, but I may not. I need to let go when there's something that shows that I'm wrong. So that's very important. But also, following up from what Dhammamegha said, metta, basically, we always need metta, cherishing. We need metta for ourselves, we need metta for other people. We're going to make mistakes, they're going to make mistakes. Things arise in dependence on conditions. That's the nature of things. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Viryanaya. So, sounds like letting go of opinions and views can be both philosophical and an emotional challenge. It's the full thing, isn't it? So, and thanks, Singer Shree, for that question. Now, let me go back to a question from Abbess. And first of all, let me just say apologies. I didn't spot this question when it came up. So Abbess has asked a question which follows on nicely. What to do with the fear that rises when trying to let go? What to do with the fear that rises when trying to let go? Maybe Viryanaya, you can reflect on this to start with, if you'd like to.
Sure. Yeah, I think the first thing is to acknowledge there will be fear, and not to pretend we're not going to be afraid. It's sort of easy to think, oh well, why should I be afraid? I can push through this. I think acknowledging, yes, I'm afraid. Yes, there's fear here. That's really important, to acknowledge we're afraid, to acknowledge this is really difficult. So I think that acknowledgement comes first and so important. And then to bring kindness to that, to bring spaciousness to that, and to have that sense that fear is not the whole of our experience, that we can be bigger than it. that the fear is part of our experience, but we can bring kindness to it. I think, in brief, those are the two things: that acknowledgement, that spaciousness, and that kindness.
Thanks so much. Kamalanandi, any thoughts on fear?
Yeah. I've had to work a lot with fear in my practice life. I mean, I'm fortunate now, but I remember being gripped with fear. I had an anxiety disorder that put myself into hospital quite a few times, absolutely convinced I was dying. So I've, which I wasn't. I was actually in perfectly good health physically. So fear has been a good working ground with me. And I think where I'm at with it now is I'm just like, you just need to turn towards it and befriend it. It's like every other bit of you, it wants to be engaged with, you know. The thing with fear and other things that we don't want is we push them away and we hold them at arm's length, and we're resisting. We're like, no. You know, we've got this aversion, don't want it. And we'll do whatever we can to kind of get away from it, won't we? We'll do all the distraction or the whatever, or the, you know, intoxication, or all of those things that we, you know about. But really, the most effective thing in my experience is you just turn right towards it as much as you can, and you're like, hi, and you like welcome it in. Like if someone was knocking at the door, instead of ignoring them, you go down and you open the door, and you might not be particularly pleased to see them, but actually you need to let it in and sit with it. And even if it's just a glimmer, even if you can't deal with the whole whatever it is, just a little bit at a time, but really engaging with it. And I find that actually what that does is it takes the power out of it, because it seems to have, there's more energy in the pushing away. And when you stop with that and you let it in, it's actually like, oh, right, maybe that wasn't quite as bad as I had imagined. So, I mean, so really it's the whole arena of metta, that a whole thing of the first stage of the metta bhavana, that bringing that fear in, sitting down with it and being in conversation with it. And it's actually, I mean, it's just actually a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing to do. And then the more you do that, you build up a practice and you're less afraid of fear ongoingly. So yeah, that would be my response.
Thanks so much. That's comes out of hard-won experience. Dhammamegha, any thoughts on fear? Our last comment, I think, for this talk.
I think they were fantastic answers, those of spaciousness and metta and turning towards. I think the only thing I'd want to add is that I think that values are helpful ground to engage with fear. It's a bit like it's very easy to believe the stories that fear tells us. There's often a narrative that comes with fear or goes into fear. But if you're looking for something to hold up against that narrative or to be in conversation with that narrative, I've found that kind of values are a helpful one. So it's a bit like, what kind of person do I want to be? What kind of relationship do I want to be in? And if there's fear in that, I'll still know that that's who I want to be or how I want to act. That's the only thing I'd add. And then obviously to bring that into that spacious engagement. But I don't think you can do anything with fear if what we mean by doing anything with fear is making it go away. It's a good question.
Thanks Dhammamegha for that, and thanks to Abbs for such a great question. Well, we've had 3 rich talks. We've had some questions which have invited us into quite a deep consideration of the practical implications of holding to nothing whatever. I wonder if we can just end by sitting together again for a few seconds, half a minute, just to let some of this discussion settle in us a bit together. just noticing any feelings in our bodies connected with the discussion. Any responses in the heart. Well, let's perhaps come back together, open our eyes, take a look at who else has been together for this discussion. It's a chance perhaps for us to give a final big thanks to our speakers. There's a lot of waving, that's great. Feel free to make comments as well if you like. What a great start to the talks of this online festival on this theme, holding to nothing whatever. So hope we see each other some more on Zoom in the next few days, and up till then, take care wherever you are. I'll end the meeting in a bit.